that one can learn new teaching methods if you just apply yourself. So I'm here to learn too, Mike.
It's an honor to be here, Steve, and I'm humbled by your comment there. That's makes me blush.
Well, hey, how about telling us a little bit about the design of your guitar class at the Youth Performing Arts School? I think in my experience, it's a little unique, and we are really um, at a very great position here in the history of guitar education to see guitar programs growing around the nation. And I wonder if you could just tell us a little bit about what the design is like there at the Youth Performing Arts School.
Sure, and I'm fully aware. Both my parents were teachers, so I knew when I landed this job that I really kind of hit a home run first time at bat because they've been super receptive and supportive along the way with everything. So just to add to the history real quick, so the Youth Performing Arts School is over. It celebrated its 40th anniversary, I think, just last year or 2 years ago. Sorry, it all blends in here, but it's a wonderful program with piano, dance, orchestra, band, musical theater, choir. There's all these different disciplines in which that you can major in, and to
Mhm.
be a major in any of these programs entailed being in 8 courses within that structure. So when I came along after I finished my master's with you in 2014, they needed somebody that was, um, they had a lot of kids in choir, so they needed someone that was a vocal music education degree, which happened to be my undergrad degree. That was a guitar specialist, and that could help with music theory. And that's when, as you recall, I was helping you and all the TAs with grading music theory papers back at U of L back in the day. So there's this unique trail of breadcrumbs that led me to the Youth Performing Arts School. And I took the time to kind of really observe what the other programs, how they structured their courses and what was successful for
Mhm.
them.
Mhm.
And I kind of just gradually kind of just copy and paste it where guitar could fit in within those parameters. So for me, it means 8 different guitar classes, 4 of which are ensemble based, and the other 4 are my tech and rep classes. And for us guitarists, you can kind of imagine what that is. It's technique, and so scales, arpeggios, rasgueados, tremolo, the
Mhm.
usual business here, and then just a lot of work with etudes. So it's kind of balancing out the soloist and the ensemble player. And then because we're at such a fabulous school where um, there's these really storied histories with choir and orchestra and band, we do lots of different unique collaborations. So in my time so far, we've done 2 song cycles. We've done the Manuel de Falla. We've
Oh,
also
yeah.
done a Schubert song cycle. We've collaborated with U of L. We did the Garcia concerto. Gosh, that was like many years ago. The one
That's
that we did
right.
at the GFA in 20, 2013, I guess. Yeah.
And
What
you
else? We've
conducted
done,
it. Yeah.
yeah, we've done, oh my gosh, we've had a dance collaboration before with original choreography. One of my favorites was we did the Roland Dian Soar arrangements with string quartet, and we had live improvised painting happening at the same time. I've been able to kind of push my own career and do Romancero Gitano by Tedesco as well. So it's just been a wonderful creative space. And I know that's not, I guess if I can say anything about that is I realize that I'm really fortunate. And also, it just never hurts to just try to, ask your administration, can I add another course? It seems like, hey, I have a lot of kids in here. There seem to be interest in it. Can I do this? So a lot of it was that kind of grasp of just seeing how critical mass was developing, and then just kind of adding and evolving, kind of looking at it, my colleague's playbook, so to speak. Hope
Mhm.
that made sense, Steve.
Oh, yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely, absolutely, yeah, then I think what we're talking about here in a way both is, the curriculum design that you had to do there at the Youth Performing Arts School, where prior to that, there was a guitar class, but not an established program.
And you started that guitar elective, by the way, so I have to say
Ri
that.
right, and I have to point out that that came only through the interest in the administration there at the Youth Performing Arts School, where one of the vice principals or assistant principals, Brian Crady, had the idea that he wanted to make that happen. And that is, I think, essential for any of this to work, is that we have the support of the administration, and that they see the benefit in adding a guitar class to a school curriculum. And this is during the school day, not after the school day,
Yes.
that we did this. And I think that's an important distinction to make, because we can often begin with an after school program and then that adapt into the school day.
And sure, and even the YPass program in of itself has grown so much too, because it took me a couple years
Hmm.
to, to write the curriculum map to get it passed. There's like school-based decision making boards that are going to check your curriculum and before you add the class, and then there's other procedures, that go up as far as the superintendent that determine if you can, you know add these courses to the common curriculum. So it does take a while, for sure. But when I first started the job, I was only teaching 2 guitar classes. I always make the joke that I was the musical utility man, where I was teaching choir, or assisting with choir, music theory, humanities, and then just a little bit of guitar. And now my life is essentially all guitar there. But it took, this is year 7 for me, but it took some time for, to get to that vantage point. It's
Right.
the man on top of the mountain didn't fall there, as
Right.
Vince Lombardi says. So
Well, in that I think underscores the point that you had to have secondary areas of expertise, or at least proficiencies, let's say, to
sure.
bring to the school and help them with their areas of need in their curriculum. So that's important. That's an important lesson for guitarists to learn.
Yeah, if you don't see a position that says, guitar teacher wanted, that
Hmm.
you still might want to go in there. You still, if it's an orchestra position or a choir position, um, it's a long game. It's you can't just look at just the short term. Oh, this is not what I want. You have to, I don't know, be vulnerable, make yourself uncomfortable. I never really saw myself as a conductor, but when you're in front of 106, you know, choir members, there's a whole different energy. There's a whole different sense of classroom management.
Sure.
And yeah, you can't just hide behind your guitar. You have to, there's, especially in that setting, so, um, yeah, I would just encourage people just to, stick with it. And then if guitar is really your love, there's lots of, maybe this is conversations we'll have today about how you raise money or how you purchase more instruments or how you gradually add these classes. But
Hmm.
it takes a lot of other friends that, are starting to find themselves into guitar positions.
Right, right, and that's something that segues. Actually, there's a branch, a couple of branches here we could go into. One thing that you mentioned was with instrument acquisition. That could be part of building a program, and kind of a hurdle to
Mhm.
overcome. But if I remember correctly, the guitar program that is, say, new to a school is only something like 1/5 the cost of a band program.
Oh, it's insane, right? I have a presentation that I did at KMEA in 2016, I believe,
That's
about how to.
Kentucky Music Educators
Yeah,
Association.
yes, yeah,
Yeah,
the
yeah.
Kentucky Music Educators Association. Yes, so basically just detailing how to start a guitar program, and I was able to kind of set it to about $6,000 for 20 guitars and footstools, um, and just sort of like basic library kind of materials for that.
Right.
So yeah, I mean, you can barely buy a French horn for that price. So when someone sees that
Yeah,
you can have 20 kids participating in a guitar program, so maybe we can make that available somewhere
right.
as well.
That would be great. That would be fantastic. We can post that for people to see, because the resources that are in that presentation I saw it are really good for those who are out there, either in the process of building a guitar program, or maybe find community for guitar programs, to come online with the other curricula that are out there. And sometimes it's just a matter of knowing what to do and not knowing where to start. Um,
Yeah, yeah. So there's a good kind of shopping list, so to speak, and then as to where to go, I mean, there's so many avenues that one could take. So we, um, you know, I know him through you, and of course I purchased my concert guitar. But David Conti with Reverie Guitars. So we have a local Cordoba vendor here in our region um, that has been very helpful at kind of like being an intermediary between Cordoba and
Hmm.
like asking for guitar donations sometimes. So finding
Right.
a local vendor is can be really helpful. If you're doing it through your school, you'll have your essentially nonprofit stat or tax exempt status rather from it, which is helpful. You know, our Guitar Society, Louisville Guitar Society, has also helped purchase. So because we're a nonprofit, um, they might have resources, and they might have a mailing list or a group of followers or donors that are interested in making a a tax deferred donation as well. So and then your school itself might have some budget as well. So there's in parent teacher booster organizations. I think that's like 4 or 5 things there that, as you have your shopping list in front of you, um, you have to be resourceful and kind of and ask around. But that's what I would do as a start. Look for a local guitar society. Look if there's any local music shops, vendors, etc. Ask your school board,
Right.
etc.
Right. 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 Yeah, and I recall always a couple of instrument donations that happen. Uh,
Yes.
we even had one of our teachers for the program donate her earnings from that particular session of teaching and buy a guitar. It's one guitar, but
Yes.
it really adds
Yeah.
up.
China Huddleston gave us when I first started my program at YPass, there was one Cordoba C5.
Hmm.
So just to let you know that
Yeah,
this
still
stuff
there.
does happen.
Yeah.
So yeah, yeah, it's just amazing people's generosity. For example, the radio station WUOL also has look at your local classical music radio, see if they have instrument donation kind of program set up, because we've received a guitar from them as well. So there's at least 5 or 6 resources to kind of start scrambling and making it all work.
So in thinking then about in building a program, one of the things I was considering here is, and you already mentioned that your program with the 8 classes you have 4 that are ensemble based and then 4 that are technique and repertoire, right? Is
Yep.
that's yeah. So that that then gives up the fact that a guitar program kind of fits into a special place within the overall musical offerings that a school might have. On the one hand, there is the uh, very obvious uh, medium for guitar performance, which is the solo classical instrument, in which students in a classroom setting would be playing and making absolute cacophony if they're all working on their own individual solos.
Mhm.
But then on the other hand, it sounds like opportunity there with the individual students working on, say, the same etude
Yeah.
or the same techniques. Do you work with the students when they're doing that as an entire group most of those classes, or how do you do that? Do they do breakout rooms in times when they're doing in-person learning?
Sure. No, we will do, if we're all playing Giuliani Opus 48 number 3, right? We're all playing the same etude. So I'll kind of do like a median range, or I'll lowball the metronome speed a little bit.
Hmm.
But we'll all practice with different dotted rhythms, or different. I'll kind of apply different techniques.
Hmm.
We'll all play scales together at a variety of metronome markings.
Hmm.
Um, and then there will be some time in class where there is a moment of cacophony, and I've learned to accept that I'm not a bad person or a bad teacher for letting that happen. And if
Oh,
administration comes in, this is just
right.
what it's like.
Oh, sure.
Um,
Yeah.
I, I think as a young teacher, starting off, you're kind of like embarrassed, like you don't have the classroom management style to do that, but it's just how it goes. It's not like we're a keyboard room where everyone has headphones on. It's
Right.
uh,
Right.
it's just part of our instrument. So there is a large part of sight reading and arpeggios and scales, and then playing slow run throughs of the etude, or doing dotted rhythms together, etc.
Hmm.
That we can all do as a group. But then it's okay to let it devolve a little bit and just try to you know then your classroom management chops can come into play if you see someone not really
Mhm.
participating or doing what they need to do. Um, but
Sure. A good check-in point with those students, yeah.
yeah,
So how do you do how do you then handle if this whole group is working on the same material and there are different levels within the class? I'm sure, of course, you if you have four tech and rep classes, you have tech and rep one, two, three, and four, which
hmm
should I guess ostensibly that would go map to their freshman, sophomore, junior, senior years. Is that basically what it
exactly.
does? Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah. So within each one of those levels, though, of course, we may have different strata of students and their experience and abilities. How do you manage that as a class setting?
sure. So, I think the expectations can just evolve a little bit. Whereas, we'll go back to that Giuliani etude. I can maybe ask my seniors to play it at, dotted quarter note equals 150 or
Mm,
something like that. Whereas
okay.
for my freshmen, maybe they're playing it at 60. Like it's just a
Mm,
PMI, but they have a differentiated kind of expectation
mhm,
with it.
mhm,
And of course, yeah, I do make room for self-selected etudes, and we do pace that, and we kind of have like a normal studio class. Now, this is really, you know, part of the framing of your question was kind of in the before times, but now
mm,
how this has evolved for me. For the first 6 weeks, we all did the same Giuliani etude, but now for this next 6 weeks, everyone's doing their own. We're using etudes.co. I let the students kind of go on there, listen around, pick one that they like, and they're using that as a resource for preparing that. They'll submit. The first assignment was to give yourself 6 weeks of deadlines, like how many measures you're going to do at roughly what metronome tempo. It's okay to be wrong, but just do your best to
mm.
sort that out. And then, those are the assignments. They meet their own deadlines and their own assignments, and they turn that in. I give them feedback for it. And then we treat class much like a studio class where everyone gets a chance to perform for each other and kind of work out the development of that piece.
Right, right, right. That's a really great idea. I think that's learning the structure of practice is really important. We talked a little bit in yesterday's sessions and master classes as well about how to practice, but
Mhm.
structuring that time, that's a good skill for students to have and a necessary one that they'll need when they get to the collegiate level if they choose to go that path.
Exactly. Process is everything. It's the greatest
Yeah.
gift that we can give anybody, I think. Um, Yeah, and really, we can be more or less detailed with how the assignment goes, but I have them writing in their left hand and right hand fingerings and sending
Mm,
a screenshot of that as well too, so they're really owning all sides of the process. And and someone will write the M finger 5 times in a row, and it's not like I'm mad
mhm.
at them. I just need to teach them. I understand where their current
Right,
level of context is. So I
right.
think it's a great way to just let them grow from it for as well. So.
Yeah. That's such an important thing. I'm always amazed at how a very clear and direct suggestion like put measure numbers in your score will often take like 4, 5, or 6 times before it really just kind of clicks. And we saw in some master classes yesterday, some students had measure numbers in their scores, some didn't, and it's abundantly clear immediately how easy it can be to have a dialogue about musical context when you can refer to a specific measure number
Mhm.
rather than have a long discussion about this page, this line at this particular point here. Yeah, it's great. Process is very important, and developing those habits early on is good for the students, I'm sure.
Yeah, it's compound interest, one hopes.
Right, right. So, what about thinking of still about the solo music students are playing? What about the style and genre in your classroom? I've been to some guitar classes where I know that it's very much a part of their curriculum to have steel string acoustic guitars in the class, electric guitars in the class, and their program includes that music as part of the curriculum. What has been
Sure.
your approach, and where do you see the pros and cons of each?
I struggle with it, and I don't really have the exact ratio for what I do, but
Mhm.
I realized after a couple years of teaching that I've created this monster of a student who can, play through Capriccio Arabe and read everything well, but they don't know how to read a chord chart. And I was like,
Yeah.
Gosh, what have I done? Um, so I do have resources that I like. The Musicians Institute has this this rhythm guitar anthology that I really love. I'll find it and put a link up at some point, but it has like
Okay.
24 different chapters, and
Oh
it's
wow.
quite thorough between just your open position chords going all the way into all varieties of different bar chords, all the way into, half diminished, sharp nines, whatever, et cetera, et cetera. So I I would love it if you asked me the question in like 3 more years and to see
Uh-huh.
if I make some more progress with fitting that in. But
Right.
I do have opportunities. Again, somewhat unique to YPass, but maybe does exist a bit. But when we do school musicals, we have a live pit band, student run pit band. Actually, fun fact: Dr. Manley conducted one of the pit bands when he went to YPass himself. So
Mhm.
a real. We were talking about how difficult it is for a guitarist to kind of get into classroom and assume a conducting role. There's a moment right there where you were already taking on one of the
Right.
biggest challenges of being a teacher, and I think of being a music teacher. Period. Um, but anyway, I do have opportunities for my kids to play in the pit band. We have an amazing jazz band program as well with Mr. Essig, who's just world class. So a lot of stuff will kind of fall in that domain. And if they're
Mhm.
interested in it, maybe I'd recommend a different private teacher that might specialize more in that. There's a couple rare birds in our area of people that can really do both
Mhm.
classical
Mhm.
and jazz. But yeah,
Yeah.
I don't do great with it. I totally acknowledge the need for it, and I do pepper it in sometimes. I want all my kids to it because I mean, it doesn't have to be a disparate thing because like if you can read chord charts, that means you know where all the roots, like just bar
Sure.
chords on the
Right.
sixth string and fifth string. That means you know where all the roots are. And that means you know how to read what's in those positions, right? You would know that the seventh fret is
That's
B
true.
on the sixth string, so it
Right.
doesn't have to be something that's different. Um, I'm I'm just working on like when does the sequence make most sense for
Sure.
and I'm that's where I'm at.
Sequencing is always, yeah, that's always a concerning consideration. I'm sure that's one of the questions that we all face as guitar educators is that early on in a student's learning, they may have started to form some knowledge and literacy in another notation system than standard notation, which we would traditionally teach them if we're working through, Shearer or whatever, insert whatever method you may be using with your student. And the the tab readers and the chord chart readers come to the class already knowing some of that stuff, don't they?
Yes, and I do give I do teach them that, especially for my guitar one class is an elective class usually, so it's like no prior experience necessary, like
Mhm.
just come to the party, so to speak.
Mhm.
And I think it's a disservice to them to not show them a little bit of everything because I could have a senior taking, guitar one as an
Mhm.
elective, and I want them to be able like this is how one would read music. We're definitely gonna cover first position throughout the year. This is how
Right.
to read chord charts. This is how to read tablature. It's important to at least have a frame of reference for it. But
Right.
after that, I don't. Um, I'm not the best at having it intersect with my curriculum, but I totally recognize the need for it, and I definitely admire people for tackling it because it's what the guitar does really well. And there's no need to not have it be part of um, your pedagogy.
Right. Sure. Sure. Yeah. No, I recognize that at the collegiate level as well. Getting students to be proficient readers is an important thing, and adding on the chord charts and tabs is essential. So, then looking at the two different classes, you have the solo and then the conducted ensembles. What what role does the conducted ensemble have for meeting like the state standards or class requirements? I'm just imagining how that then it seems to me that it would lend some legitimacy to the guitar program in the eyes of those who see a choir, band, or orchestra program, an ensemble large enough to need a conductor. That does it fit in well with any of that, or how does that
For
work?
sure, it checks off all the same boxes of. Forgive me for not having the standards numbers kind of memorized, but yeah, it checks off state standards
Yeah,
and national standards
right,
of just
right,
making music together.
yeah,
Uh, I won't go deeper than that because I'm going to show my ignorance pretty quickly. But yeah, it's one of those things that just checks off all the boxes. It adds legitimacy to your program. People have a model for it because they've seen orchestras and
Right.
bands and choirs before. It allows you to give concerts and to involve all, because not every kid is interested in playing a solo. I've found that out just in the same way that you have a population of people, whether it's community orchestras or in a school orchestra, they know how to read music, they enjoy playing, they don't want to be the star of the show, but they really love
Mhm.
making music together with people. And
Sure.
that's a valuable experience for them too, to still grow within with that context.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think it does all of the above for the things that you mentioned, and it really makes classroom management so much easier. I mean, I really can't encourage enough. It's been a bit of a wild horse to figure out how I wanted the technique and repertoire class to go, and a lot of that was formed by how I ran the ensemble. I learned what kind of classroom management techniques work well under ensembles, and then you kind of see where the Venn diagram overlaps and then where it doesn't.
Okay, yeah, right, right. And I imagine too, you can have things that are have an intersection of the techniques used in an ensemble piece that they're playing to be used in the tech and rep class then later.
Totally, and
Right.
vice versa. Yeah, yeah. Add a note, dotted rhythms, et cetera, et cetera. We just do it. We can do it in an ensemble setting, or we can do it in a solo setting. Yeah, they can be really harmonious with
Hmm.
each other, and it gives the kids that many more experiences. Again, with how to differentiate your practice. That hopefully when they go to practice, they have these things. Like you said, it was so difficult just for someone to get the memo to write in measure numbers. Hopefully, after having done it in ensemble and in tech and rep, and then doing dotted rhythms there and in here, they can really own that these are just procedures for.
Right, right, absolutely. And that kind of is part of my next question is about that student learning and effective teaching. And one of the greatest challenges I've found is getting an ensemble, standing before an ensemble, and getting that ensemble to watch me, the conductor, not out of some kind of vanity or narcissistic aim, just that this is where the beat is and this is where I want you to follow. But as guitarists, we're just so tied to the page, and sometimes we're just our noses are in the score and not looking up to the conductor. I know this is a skill that we absolutely need if we're going to play even in an unconducted ensemble, a large ensemble. It's good for us to look at our ensemble mates from time to time. Have you found any techniques that work for getting your ensemble to look at the conductor?
uh, a couple things. I
Hmm.
guess sometimes we'll practice memorizing a passage and flipping the
Hmm.
page over and then just having that kind of moment together.
Right.
Also, doing music, you train this in your sight reading as well too. When you train someone to look at the next measure while they're playing the current measure, other
Right.
kind of other kind of techniques like that. And there's lots of ways to do that. You could have, I remember Greg Goodhart doing this, doing a presentation where he had like four measures of music out, and it was actually really clever. So he had four different slides set up on PowerPoint, and basically he had all four measures, and he said, okay, start looking at the second one, and then he just clicked the slide, and then the next slide blocked out the first measure. So it's
Right.
like you had to and it kept
Right.
going, and it was
Yeah.
like kind of overwhelming at first, but just showing that it is possible to read ahead, and
Yeah.
that kind of process. And then also, I guess, under that same umbrella, when we're doing sight reading, when the music is substantially easier, then you
Hmm.
can really invite, and there's more repetitions, there's more ostinatos and things like that. There's room to invite them to do it. I think it's just about communicating it, right? Because the whole point of them looking up is to communicate with them. So it's sort of our obligation to communicate what, as a leader, what's necessary of that, which is for them looking up, and it's training them to do it. And we do this either in our sight reading by kind of creating those moments of like mental overwhelm, or we can do it
Hmm.
by just memorizing something, or again, I'll vocal, like obviously we can't do it in a concert, but if we prep it enough times when we're rehearsing a piece, I'll say look up, look up,
Hmm.
look up, and then
Yeah.
hopefully they'll have be primed for that.
Yeah.
So I hope those weren't too obvious, but that's kind of how I've approached it. And again, every year it's the same problem, right? Because you always have new kids and it's always the
Sure.
same thing. So the
Yeah.
topic never leaves. You never fully create this culture of it. It's something
Right.
that has to go in, day out, year in, year out kind of thing.
It often, well, one thing that I found helpful is to demonstrate by example, and for when I myself as a conductor am not stuck in the score with my ensemble, and I'm looking up at them. When they look up and make eye contact with me, and they don't look up and see me with my face in the score, it seems to really help. But this often reminds me of these. There are certain moments that it's so essential to look up at a conductor, like at moments of rubato or rallentando or ritardando, cadence points, new sections, new tempos starting. Any of those are just these turning points in a piece that the ensemble has to look up. And I think of it like we have stop signs, yield signs, and roundabouts. And often as an ensemble, it's like we as a collective ensemble look like a group of American tourists in England hitting a roundabout on the wrong side of the road, on the wrong side of the car, or from their perspective, the correct side, but having no clue what to do when we get there. And it's just utter chaos with the different tempos going on from the ensemble trying to feel that out. Um, but I always think of that when learning to be a conductor, other than just like, kind of like learning our simple beat patterns and what it looks like to create a good ictus and all of that. We often have that challenge of figuring out how to get the ensemble to actually follow us. Um,
Yeah, and I think that's another skill there as well, because again, a lot of our conversation today is about someone starting a guitar program, or a guitarist that finds themselves in a position all of a sudden where um, we know how to read our own scores, but like there's a different procedure for reading an ensemble score. You know what I mean? And there's a whole different set of demands. And I know for myself, I've had to really learn how to get out of the score as well, because yeah, maybe I for my first couple of years, maybe I wasn't modeling a behavior. Maybe they were looking up and like, he doesn't seem to need us. So, you know, he's doing his own thing up there. So, so yeah, I think you make a really great point about modeling it, and it is our responsibility as teachers and leaders in the classroom to really understand the score and know the music very well. And just in the same way that you might visualize, Ty was talking about his presentation yesterday, where when Sung was asking about preparing people for competitions, and
mhm.
Ty was just saying that he was just visualizing the left hand. I mean,
Sure.
I'm visualizing, I'm seeing my ensemble laid out, I'm visualizing when a cue comes in or when I need to prep it. Like, there needs to be that same mental rehearsal. We can't just like think that, oh, we read music, this is going to be in the bag. Like, your performance as a conductor needs just as much work in front of the mirror and as well. So I think owning that process and not being resentful of it in a way. I think you know we love playing our guitar as a soloist, but if we're going to be in the classroom, we're going to be a leader, we need to realize that when we assume the identity of conductor, there's a sense, and again, I'm thinking of TY again, but there's attention, intention, and commitment to being a conductor. If you don't
Mhm.
see yourself as a conductor, you won't intend it, you won't have enough attention for it, and you won't have the commitment for it. And we need that for success teaching. So there's a real kind of mindset behind it too that I think is really valuable. And I loved how much TY talked about it as a soloist, but I see it to be just as true in the classroom as a conductor as well.
Yeah, that's a good message. That should be kind of the message of the session here today.
Oh, I say it all the time in my classroom, really, because sometimes I'm sure you feel the same way too. I don't. I think just as artists, sometimes we don't even want to call ourselves an artist. We're like, oh no, when I can play the chaconne, then I'm an artist.
Yeah.
But it's
Right.
like, no, we have to be an artist to play the chaconne. It's like you
Mhm.
you have to take the identity on first. You
Mhm.
don't get the identity as this prize that's dependent on something. You have to embody it, and it's the fake it till you make it, whatever you want to say. But when you do put the hat on, I'll say it again because I say it to my students so much and I just love it. It's that intention, attention, and commitment that just changes when you say I'm a conductor. Because what does a conductor do? It's
Right.
there's a much, it's a whole different thought process.
Yeah. Right. 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 That's great. Great. Great advice. So, we're getting a little bit short here on time, but I thought I would just share a few things here that I share with my students. I'll just put some of this into a, a chat here with our panelists and attendees, and let that be there. I don't know if that will be of any help to folks, but those are some links that I use with a lot of my pedagogy class, and I found it helpful out there. And I'm kind of focusing on one of these particular elements, the idea of getting students to a particular place. We see so often in our course design, there's a somewhere along the line a question needs to be answered about the goals, objectives, and student learning outcomes in a class. And I have a certain very simple, broad based student learning outcome that I measure success by for my students. And one of them is that those who are music majors whose primary instrument is guitar, that at the end of their undergraduate degree, I want them to be job placement ready as competent artists, musicians, guitarists, and to have that opportunity at that critical place in their studies to either continue on to a graduate program of their choice or land a job that they're going to flourish in and see that career through. And the same would be for graduate students, right? To have that opportunity at the end of those 2 years to audition for any number of doctoral programs and be successful in that endeavor. But not just toward teaching to a job or a vocation, but developing the complete musician. And I know it's you're working with a student that is a completely different place along that path, but preparing them just the same is very important. And I think there's no more uh, formative opportunity in a teacher working with a student than when you're at that place where your students are entirely molding themselves as individuals in this time period in high school. What do you kind of imagine that you see through as a success for yourself as a teacher when you see it finish and they get to the end of your program? What are those kind of broad ideas?
Sure. Yeah, there's so many. I'll try to answer the question directly because there's so many other little things that are coming to me here at once. But much in the same way for you is for my guitar majors, I want them to be able to audition and hopefully get a scholarship somewhere. Insofar as they're interested in pursuing music, I want them to be ready. And we do have other requirements where they'll do a half-hour recital their senior year and a
Hmm.
15-minute recital their junior year. So it's just they're making these little benchmarks where they have a program of music that they can play, they can audition with, they can compete with, they
Hmm.
can search for scholarships. So I think that it's very similar to your to you with that outcome. Just having them to be able to successfully audition for an undergrad program, to be really competitive for scholarships as well, and hopefully, this is where it gets a little bit more philosophical, I guess. For my students that are electives, like I said earlier, I really hope they get the gift of process, and then much like I'm thinking again of our conversation with TY with all of his other interests, that they realize that how they do anything is how they do everything. And I always want to teach um, the sense of care that music has fostered in me, and the sense of attention to detail,
Right.
presence, flow state, empathy, all of these kind of pillars that music has given me. I want my students to get that in some way as well. That's sort of the broad kind of philosophical mission statement to it. And then also, um, I really love my job because I'm like welling up thinking about this in a way, but I remember when I first heard like Julian Bream for the first time, right? I remember being their age when I first found Rachmaninoff or discovered this music. And like, gosh, it's just like it's so overwhelming. And like,
Yeah. Yeah.
as guitarists, we have such a beautiful community, but it can be a very small community sometimes. We're like, ah, you're still playing Leanda, like that kind of thing. It's like, they're like, oh my gosh, have you heard this piece called Leanda? It's the best thing in the world. I can't wait to play it.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, and it's so refreshing to be around that, because you're with people without cliche in a way. And just sharing that with them is just beautiful. That, I think that the other kind of broader thing is, is their life richer? Do they have more context to appreciate in life and in art and beyond? So I guess the very kind of political, kind of like bureaucratic school answer is yes, they're college ready. They can do that, and then it kind of has these secondary and tertiary, kind of, maybe the primary is that they're richer people, and then the tertiary is that they're college ready, however you want to see
Sure.
it. But
Sure.
um, that's how I view myself and view my role, because I remember how much this music meant to me, and if I can just share that and have them enjoy it, because it's very easy. I've even had this conversation with you recently, that there's a great soul search. Like, is it all about the Carnegie Hall pipeline, is just creating these virtuosos? I don't know. I'm
Mhm.
not sure. I think it might be better that people find ways to authentically express themselves and grow, and that might not always mean being, Marcin Dila, and that's okay. In
Mhm.
fact, it's maybe better that not everyone does that. So, so yeah,
Well, isn't the world better that someone has done that?
well,
The world is better that someone has done that as well.
yes,
But
for sure,
the,
yes, yeah,
the,
no, yeah,
I think that the point there to me that I really grasp is when I play a concert and the audience has that appreciation that's there from an early age of experience. There's a completely different experience between the artist and audience when that dialogue is one that is a shared language of love that we instilled in our students somewhere along the way. I hope that happens.
yeah.
And to your point about the secondary and tertiary uh, experiences or goals or outcomes, perhaps students are life ready because they have become more complete individuals through this experience in class.
Yeah, I
The
hope
great
so.
effect happens with guitar class.
That's we have Zen in the art of archery, or Zen in the art of motorcycle maintenance. Mine
Mhm.
just happens to be guitar.
Yeah,
You know what I
right,
mean? Just
right.
it's how I pursue my self actualization.
Yeah. Well, we have very little time left before we do another little technique
Technique workshop.
workshop here, and I want to get ready for that. I don't know that anyone has posted questions or comments here for us today, but if anyone has those questions, we can make sure to get some of those resources available to you all. And I hope the next time we do this, we'll add on even more participants and panelists to the discussion. What resources we've shared here today are those that are shared by many, and it's just great to be a part of this community. And thanks so much, Mike, for being a part of it today.
Oh, my pleasure, Steve. And yeah, I'm sure our names are here on YouTube or Facebook. You probably can see from the Zoom call. So just look us up, and we'd be happy to continue the conversation with you.
Cool. All
All
right.
right. Good luck with your technique
Hey,
class. I'll see you on there.
thanks. I'll see you soon.
All right.
So I start the day by making sure I'm relaxing there. So I may close my eyes and just kind of come to a place of inner calm. One thing for the eyes to really make sure you do, you can just kind of open and close your eyes gently, blink. For the jaw, this is one of the best things for relaxing the jaw. If you do this, or if you tense your neck at all too, is take your tongue and place it at the back of your teeth, or you can even place your tongue gently between your teeth. Then, if you clench your jaw, you're going to know it. You're going to bite your tongue, and you're not going to do that again. So do a bit of that, and then coming down to the shoulders, I just lift and relax the shoulders a couple times, straight up like that, straight up and down. I'm also finding the range of motion of those shoulders up and down, and then I roll the shoulders together and actually using the shoulder blades themselves to massage that spot in my back, the place between your shoulder blades there. The muscles there often hold tension there too, especially after a long day of practice or whatever we may have done the day before to stress ourselves. So that motion now, when I sit, sometimes our shoulders just kind of come forward and like that and think this is relaxed. We actually want to place our shoulders kind of like we're hanging them on a rack, just putting them on the coat rack. Imagine the coat hangers there at your shoulders. And from there down, now all of that is going down. And I imagine now the energy from my neck through my shoulder, straight down my arm, going right into the floor, feeling the entire weight of my arm. Then, what I'm doing with my hands now by my side, I'm going to begin flexing and relaxing, squeezing and relaxing. This is a gentle motion just to begin getting energy, blood flowing into my hands. Hi, Nicolas. Good to see you. Hello. So we want that energy flowing, and now I begin squeezing quite tightly here in my fists. I want a lot of blood flow going there. Then, after I'm beginning to feel the warmth that's there, I'll now begin doing little rotations. So you can take your wrists and find that full range of motion. Here I'm just turning from the wrist all the way down and then moving in a clockwise and then counterclockwise motion. Okay? So I do that, and I often like to do this by my side so that I'm letting all of these tendons remain as relaxed as possible. And then I do this, stretching the hand out all the way, kind of making starfish as far as I can, and then back and closing in. And do that several times. You do that maybe even like 10, 12 times. You'll start to feel some warmth developing there for sure in your forearms. You should. Okay, and then I bring my hands together, and now is the point at which I would just massage the hand itself. Give the palm all over a gentle massage, and really make sure we sometimes forget, but also get there in the wrist. A gentle massage on all of that for both hands. And I'll just say this at this point, this might be the time. I know for years I thought the thing that I needed most at this moment was to just really go at just pushing against my hands and doing this kind of stretch. And I even was suggesting it for a long time until I was introduced to some of these ideas of more passive or active stretching. And this, as I understand it, is something that's better to do after you've practiced at the end of the session. So we want to be careful with stretches like that because we are putting force on those tendons, and it can be a bit extreme and a shock to the system to put that kind of pressure there too soon. So what I do instead is I make that motion, but I just stretch out. Imagine you're pushing against an imaginary wall, right? And then that imaginary wall remains as you then bring your hands down and you push against it with the back of your hands. Okay, so doing that, and then bring your hands back around and you push against this way and all sides. Now that for me anyway, that makes my forearms feel much more prepared for movement. I feel much more limber in the hands and arms. If some of you are getting to that point like I am, where sometimes it's just like your bones themselves need to, or your joints themselves need some extra motion and mobility. I am not opposed to just plain running hot water over your hands. That can also be a good warm up kind of boost to the system to just get ready to go. So now taking from that point on, there are many other stretches we could do, but just for time's sake, we'll go on to the guitar. And I take my instrument now. Let's all get our instruments. And one of the first things I do in the day is a kind of a calibration study. Really, I do like to warm up right and left hands alone. My thinking there is that warming up the hands is an act that I really want to have absolute focus on in the first things that I'm playing on the instrument. So some days I'll vary this. I'll do the left hand first, and some days I'll do the right hand first. But I tend to do the right hand first because most things we're going to do with the left hand are going to involve articulating the string with the right hand. So I really like to work in this way. I start off with my fingers prepared on the strings, P-I-N-A, on the first four strings there. Yeah. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to remain with my thumb prepared on the string, and I'll see if I can switch my video here for you to get a better view of the right hand while I'm working on that. There we go. That's a little better. So I'll leave the thumb prepared there on the fourth string, looking for that. And oftentimes I'll just kind of do a check and say, okay, are you doing the things you want your students to be doing? Are you placing 3 or 4 fingers underneath the wrist? Does your hand position look like you want it to look? Because sometimes we just kind of, forget, or we'll adapt into something new, and we want to kind of check in and question that. So I'm going to leave my thumb prepared while I use I, M, and A in this warm up. So thumb is going to stay there. I'm just going to pluck the third string, and I'm using free stroke here intentionally, and all I'm doing right now, honestly, is just thinking about that thumb placement, or rather my I finger placement, contact point. The string is there between nail and flesh. I'm working with kind of my ordinary or default tone, approximately somewhere there at the back of the sound hole, looking straight on. My I finger is about over that rosette there, and then I make that stroke, and I want to create a range of dynamics here. So I'll start off there where I might say on a scale of 1 to 10, I'm somewhere at about a 6, let's say, some mezzo forte-ish sound. And then I'll try something much softer. And right now what I'm doing is I'm thinking about that stroke and how much I'm allowing my tip joint to collapse, if I want that to happen, if I want to work with that kind of tone or not, and how fast that motion is moving, that my motion is coming from here at the base of the finger. And then this is critical. This is the most important part. I'm scanning my hand for tension anywhere else. And in those first strokes that I came to the guitar with today, when I was playing with the I finger alone, one thing I really started to notice was I was tensing up over here in the C finger. And I want that to be relaxed. So it's there, it's resting next to the A finger. It's part of this stroke, but it's absolutely not tense. It's remaining relaxed. And now from this place, from a piano or pianissimo dynamic, this is a very good place to then begin building dynamic levels, but not increasing tension. So I'm going to call this a 1 for today on the dynamic level. And then I'm going to go to a 2, then a 3, then a 4. And now I just felt tension increase in my elbow, so I'm going to relax that again. And then a 5, and then that 6 again, and then 7, and then 8. Oh, that's still 7. Then 8, and then 9, and then 10. Now you might notice as I do that, I began to increase the amount that I dip into the string or engage the string. There are several aspects of articulating a string that we often don't think about. and they start from the very first point. Well, it's a phase or a cycle, so we could call any one of these places our starting point depending on where we are in that cycle. But we'll start with that contact point. We want that string between nail and flesh. Then after that, I load the string with energy, or I engage the string. That's when you can see it, especially when I was playing there at the upper end of the dynamic range I was working with today. I was pressing into the string with weight, and that weight is coming primarily from my forearm. I can use the weight of my arm to my advantage by putting weight into the string, and that you can see displaces the string from its neutral position there into the guitar. Now with that weight loaded into the string, I can follow through. After that follow through, then I have the return, and the whole process starts all over again. Preparation, contact point is important there. Load the string, follow through, extend. And it's at that point where I'm beginning to put pressure into the string where other sides of my hand can tense up. And sometimes this is, remember the hand, it's an organic system, meaning if I have tension in one place, it may telepath to another place, or it may spread to another place. So if I begin putting tension into the thumb, then I may get tension in the side of the hand, in the C finger or the A finger or what have you. So that is what I'm doing right now, is a scan of all of those places to see where there may be tension. And then I simply repeat the same thing with M. So now with the M finger, you might have noticed that I didn't prepare the other fingers as I was doing that. I want to do the same thing with M. And I moved on to the B string. You could just as well go to the third string if you want to. So now with M, I'm on the B string, exact same thing. I'm going to follow through. And then I start looking at what I want to achieve here. So when I'm playing with M, this was, more of a later adaptation to my own technique when I play with M and letting A and C follow through with it. You may notice, like, when you go to make that stroke at first, you may not do that, or you may have some funny thing happen, like the C finger actually receives tension. That in the C finger and tension there is something that you see even in many of the greatest players, and it's an issue that we need to kind of really think about in getting that to move along with A. So that's the process. We can just play a few times there yourself. Try letting M, A, and C all go through and follow through, and I'll check again. Like as I play, I might start to inadvertently adjust my hand position for tone or something like that. We always want to think about maintaining good technique, like a straight wrist, as we play there. So if you find yourself starting to do that and you have a bad spot on your nail, a lot of us will get lazy and we'll just say, oh, there's a bad spot on my nail. Okay, how about this? How about this? How about that? And that's not what you should do. First, get out your sandpaper or whatever you're using to polish your nails. Get that rough spot out of there if you can. And then really think about where your arm placement is back here. This is something about, your arm placement along the lower bout is important to the overall approach that you get in the technique that you have there at the string. I see so often, especially, this is something I notice as a player with a smaller bodied instrument and longer arms. I'll often place my arm in the wrong place here, and then I go to make an adjustment, and I make that adjustment in my wrist. And there I've got the tone I want, but now my wrist is bent and low and totally out of position. I can get that exact same tone. I'll keep my M finger exactly in that same spot and adjust that arm placement and keep my wrist. And now I have the tone, but I have a straight wrist instead. And then I make those adjustments moving back and forth here. So this is where something to just remember. Don't get stuck over here with where you place your right arm. Okay, so then finally the A finger joins in, and boy, are my nails being fussy this morning. I have buffed them several times and polished, but they just won't take. So let's see, maybe this one. That's passively non-offensive. I remember once in a lesson, Bruce told me, your tone, it offends me. So there we go. So hey, how about that? There we go. Now we're ready. Now we're ready to work on some other motions in the fingers. We don't want to forget the thumb though. And with the thumb stroke, I'm going to start here from my prepared position, and I follow through. This is something that's really helpful to get an understanding for your thumb stroke. Now this is something just like shifting or other things. There are variations on this, and some people have different philosophies. I use one. I think there's a really great illustration in the Pepe Romero method book, La Guitarra, where he shows a little circle happening here. So when I play with the thumb, I start with that good contact point, nail, string is between nail and flesh, and then I play, and my stroke comes to rest against the side of my eye finger, and I brush the side of the eye finger as I come back to the string. And as I'm doing this, one very important thing is I'm thinking about my stroke is happening from here at the base of my hand, and I'm making sure not to let tension go across the wrist and into the other side of the hand. Something like this. Okay, now you might try that also, removing your fingers from the strings where they're in a prepared position, and play that same thing, just to make sure that you're checking on things like, is your arm helping you? This is a common problem. Or maybe you're plucking and you're accidentally hitting other strings. You want to make sure that that's not part of it. Okay. Great, so that's the first part of my right hand warm-up. Now I see here we have some people on the call that I know have some technical things to add. So Sung, if you have anything to add here, feel free to jump in. Sung is a masterful guitarist that I know has some warm-up ideas. So here's the next thing. I've just worked on the flexion of the strings. Now sometimes I'll do these things out of order or in reverse order. So I just worked on just plucking the string. Now I'm going to leave my thumb prepared there on the fourth string, and I'm going to adjust this wrist height for Raschiato. And I believe what Scott Tennant says in Pumping Island about the wrist height being slightly higher for Raschiato. That's so true. That's a really good bit of advice, because we want to imagine that with Raschiato we're hitting the strings, coming down upon them. So I'm just going to mute my strings here, and I'm going to do a set of I and M alternation here. And when M strikes the strings, I'm going to let A and C come out as well. So I start here with a slightly higher wrist, I, and then M, and A and C go with, and then I alternate that back and forth. And what I'm looking for is almost like reflexive kind of motion. Reflexive speed. Jorge Caballero has a great video on YouTube about that. So I'm really trying to get the idea in my hand that like this motion is totally in reflex. You can kind of see when M goes out, there's a certain moment of a bit of relaxation as it comes back in that stroke. That relaxing the stroke back is just the beginning of that stroke, and then I pick up that momentum that I have as that reflex relaxes to continue swinging back into the hand to prepare for the next stroke. So then when I go faster, I hope to have that down. Now try N and A. It's probably a little bit lighter for you, especially the A finger alone. Just try the A finger only, get some volume going there. You notice that I is just kind of hanging here, that's loose. C goes out and becomes flexed as it extends with A. But the most important thing with any of that, whenever you're extending with C or it follows A, or even when A is doing the same with M, make sure that it's part of a range of motion. There's nothing wrong with a range of motion as long as it's extending and flexing. But as soon as that finger starts to say stay out or remain extended or stay flexed or stay inside the hand, that can spell trouble. I do not subscribe to that particular idea. I don't suggest it. So, okay, we've done those patterns. Then I do, after I, M, M, A, I do all these other patterns. A and I, M, A, M, I, P, A, I. P, A, I is a really good one. You're just basically doing like you would strum with a pick, but throwing A and I in there as well. Okay, and then I do these really loudly, and when I'm not, on on a call where I'm going to blow your speakers. I do it all on open strings and as loudly as I possibly can. Okay, so that gets that motion going. Now, the last thing that I'll go over with the right hand for this initial warm up is the string crossing. And I have a very slight variation on the string walking idea that Scott Tennant has in his great book, Pumping Nylon. I think that basic exercise of just playing each string open, or even with a single finger, that's a really good exercise. The one thing that I would do differently is I start on the first string. And I do that because I want to look at my setup in reference to other strings. So if I'm here on the sixth string, my hand and the knuckles are over here floating above the open space of the soundboard. And I want to be over some other strings so I have a very clear reference point about where my knuckle joints are lined up, like we talked about in the technique lecture yesterday. So what I should see with that, if I line up well, I should be able to take this highlighter with I there on the first string and start from my knuckle joint here. And if I go straight down to the soundboard, I should hit the second string or fall in between the second and third string when I'm playing free stroke, because I'm going to use a method that would alter for rest stroke, but we're just going to do free stroke for today. And some of you may begin with rest stroke. That may be your favorite stroke at first, but here's what I'm going to do. As I do this, I'm going to play from the first string down to the sixth and back, all with the I finger. And I'm going to decide in advance that my string crossing, the source is going to come from my elbow. So it's this motion right here. This is one of the most overlooked aspects of our technique is string crossing in general, but most specifically where string crossing comes from. It does not happen in the wrist. We don't want to do string crossing here like this necessarily. We want it to move gently in the elbow. So I'm going to place my thumb on the third string here. You could put it on the second string, but I want to leave the second string open so that, or the lower string open, so that if I have a faulty stroke or faulty hand position, I get something like this, like that, I should say, then I know it. I kind of have to try to hit another string. That's a really common mistake that we could tend to make. So here I go. I'm going to rest on the third string, and then each string going down, just the same thing. And then when I get to the fifth string, I just kind of begin to float there above, and then I come back. And notice that I deviate a little bit there in the wrist for the bass strings so that I don't get those scratchy sounds. And then I do the same thing with each finger, just checking that I'm moving there. More or less like that. And I'll just begin encouraging my whole hand to move more freely. One of the greatest quotes I've heard about tension in the hands was from Andrew Zone, who said in a masterclass here at the University of Louisville once that stasis in the hands, in the joints, in the fingers, can be a source of tension. That with movement there is no tension. That's the paraphrase, and you probably said it in better words than I. But the basic idea was that if your hands remain still, that can invite tension. But if the fingers are moving, as the fingers are moving, and specifically he was talking about that C finger, as they're moving with everything, then there's less tension. So you just kind of want to invite everything to kind of swing around and stretch out like that. And same with A. I do the A finger, then of course, and then back. Okay, so that's the right hand warm up. Now we're going to go over to the left hand. I'm going to switch frames here, switch cameras, and show you the left hand a little better. All right, so the first thing I do with the left hand, I just kind of check on weight distribution and where I am with my left hand. I'll just kind of hang here. Something I want to watch for is that my arm from the shoulder down remains relaxed, and that starts actually back here at the neck, at the base of the neck. One of the most common forms of tension we know as guitarists, we see it in both the right and the left shoulder, maybe in the right shoulder more even, is that tendency to raise the shoulders up. So I just want to remind my shoulders, they can relax. They can just let weight go into the guitar. That's actually a good thing. So then from there, I'll just bring my fingers to the sixth string, and I'm going to start what I consider to be calibration for the left hand. In this calibration, what I want to do, this calibration exercise, I want to get a sense for the amount of tension required, or I should say, I usually like to use the word energy instead of tension. Amount of energy required to get my string from its place of rest to its place of engagement at the fret, meaning how much energy does it take for me to move that sixth string from its place of rest to resting on the fret against the fret. I'm not even concerned about whether I would get a buzz out of that or not. I just want to go to the point where I feel initial contact of the string against the fret. Right now, I'm here at the sixth fret. You can go to the fifth fret, whatever you like, wherever it is. I suggest somewhere there in the middle-ish range of your neck. Let's just say the seventh fret. Let's just do that, for example. So I do that with all four fingers, and then I switch it up, and now I start doing that with one finger at a time, and I'll actually get sound now. So I'm going to do the first finger, and I'm just getting that slight bitone like that, and then I do the second finger alone, then the third finger alone, and then the fourth finger alone. Now you might notice some things here as you're playing if you observe that when I'm looking straight on, when I'm playing that, well, for one thing, there's my thumb more so behind my first finger or behind my first and second finger, between them. In other words, if I'm playing at the seventh position, I put my thumb at the seventh fret. And this is a thing I talked about in the technique workshop yesterday. There are some very fine guitarists who have a deviation on that or a variation on that, and they would suggest that your thumb goes here. And I gave the reasons yesterday why. One of them is that I want the weight of my hand to be distributed toward the first finger so that then I have more potential energy to go into the fourth finger. Okay. Now, when we're looking at this, also you might notice the way my hand is leaning. This is the way I was showing you in the Hubert Keppel technique book and in Aaron Shearer, where the perpendicular alignment of the fourth finger is more prominent than it is this way. This has to do with the way I have my wrist turned. So if my wrist were relaxed by my side, my palm would face my leg, face this way. So I'm turning my wrist this way, just less so than someone who has the other alignment that we're looking at. I'm not that way, I'm this way. So really, when you look at the knuckles of your hand, you'll probably notice that there's a very straight line between the second, third, and fourth knuckles. And then there's a little bit of a curve there, or an offset to where the first finger is. The reason for that, there's very much a part of the hand that is, the hand is divided in different ways. Anatomically, we have a first finger that can move more independently in this way than the others. And these three fingers, 2, 3, and 4 in the left hand, move more as a group, almost as if these are moving against the thumb and then the first finger is there in between. So I let that first finger, that distinction between the fingers exist, and I put fingers 2, 3, and 4 in this alignment to the neck. And that changes as I go down toward the first position. It slightly changes. So as my hand needs to open, that alignment of those knuckles to the neck is ever so slightly different. But more or less, my whole hand position has stayed the same, meaning the fourth finger is still perpendicular there. My thumb is still behind the first fret as I'm in first position. This is not true for everyone. This is more of the things that I have observed in players like Hubert Keppel. Zoran Dukic seems to do something very similar to this. So, right now, about the calibration of tension here. What I'm feeling when I'm tapping now, as I'm going along here, I'm feeling the weight of the string underneath my finger, almost as if you would bounce a bit on a trampoline without leaving the trampoline. You just begin to feel the tension of the springs beneath your feet, the surface beneath your feet, and get an idea for how much energy you're going to have coming back from the trampoline as you jump. So this same thing is true for the string. Basically, that's exactly what you're doing. You're displacing existing tension on the string, and there's a certain amount of energy required. So thinking about that, there is a certain amount of tension that is there on the sixth string in order for it to be at the string length it is and tuned to an E. So there is, a pound per foot ratio there. So in order to displace that string from its resting position back against the frets at whatever action you have, that amount of energy is the same, regardless of which finger you're using. But your fingers have different strengths, just like your hands have different strengths. If you don't believe that, you can do a little thought experiment. You can take two racquetballs and bounce them on the ground. Your dominant hand will bounce that racquetball higher than your non-dominant hand, even if you think you're giving it the same force. So what I'm doing here is I'm trying to get a sense for how much energy is required in my perception of the first finger, the second finger, the third finger, and the fourth finger. It's the same amount of energy for each, but my fourth finger obviously is at a disadvantage of the other fingers. So I do that in tap, 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 each string. And there are some hidden exercises that are going on here too. Some finger independence exercises that are going on. So for example, as I'm just doing this little tapping exercise, I'm also thinking about the other fingers remaining with great equipoise. They have an equilibrium, they have poise, they're at the ready, but they are no more tense than they need to be in that place. My third finger there, I also work on the independence of the third finger to be able to press against the string independently of the others. Meaning I don't want to press the third finger against the string and see my fourth finger kind of wiggle around and do things like that. Okay, so that I do that across all the strings. And now I get to the point where I'm ready to begin doing a little bit of warm up for the left hand. Now I'll kind of just mention it and not really go into detail, but I do the string crossing for the left hand that's in pumping nylon as well. I sometimes will just do it at the fifth fret, and especially with students with smaller hands, I'll often recommend this because as we go to the first fret, there's that little bit of stretch involved there, and I'd rather introduce that gradually. So I'll just do that, looking at my string crossing, and string crossing in the left hand is just as important to think about as in the right hand. I'll show you a common mistake that we'll see to watch out for. Here's string crossing in the left hand. And there we are. Wrist is bent back. We just got there by bending our wrist. We don't want that. We want to move the whole mechanism. And really, it's more or less like a little bit from the shoulder and a little bit from the elbow. Think of the fact that, like, if a massive crane is moving, the point where the person is operating the crane there in the chair is moving only very little. But all the way down there at the end of the crane, it might be moving 3 or 4 meters. And there in the chair, the person is not becoming, uncontrollably dizzy, moving the crane back and forth. So this is the same kind of thing. That crane operator here in my shoulder is moving very little, in my elbow moving very little as I get more motion over here. That's good efficiency of motion. Now, the energy that I talked about with the amount of pressure that I'm placing and then the other fingers being at the ready, there is a certain amount of tension that's required there. Tension meaning taking a string, for example, or a rubber band from its completely relaxed position and putting some amount of pressure into it, some amount of energy into it. That's just required to hold the hand position. So we need to understand what that difference is, the amount that it requires to hold the hand in that basic position. All right, so now for the left hand, I'm going to warm up the fingers a bit, and I do this little trill exercise. I usually like to set a metronome on for this, just so I don't have to count. The less I actually have to think about mundane things like counting, the better, because I want to allow my awareness to focus more on what I'm doing over here in the hands. So I'm going to have my metronome going here. I put it at 60. And then I'm going to do some trills. Now, the reason that is on is not so much for me to do a particular rhythm, but so that I stay at a particular rate. And then I am just going to think here the number of times that I'm going. So, passively counting, let's say. So here we go. I start with 1 and 2 trills, and I pluck that. I'm letting 3 and 4 just kind of hover there. I'm not concerned with it being super loud. And then I go to the second string. third string. I'm staying soft for now. I may get louder later on. Do some crescendos. And the fourth. And the fifth. And the sixth. And these fingers are more or less relaxed, they're just holding place over the string. So I'll show you here, if I have the fourth finger, I can still do that. It's just keeping its form. Yeah, so there will be enough tension that you have to, you have to move it aside, but so it's not going to be completely floppity. Yeah. All right, so I do all of that, and then obviously I relax, and that the left hand is probably a little more like warmed up by now, and then in between that I do arpeggios over on the right hand. So I start off. I'm going to do a series of them. I do PI, PM, and PA combinations, meaning I start each of these sets with PI, then I do a set with PM, and then a set with PA. So now I start with PI, and I do PI, A, M, PI, A, M, PI, A, M, PI, A, M. I don't know why I started with the more difficult one of the two, but I just did. That one shows up in the Iranwas. It's good, a really good one to use. But you can also, obviously, the other one would be PIMA. I'm doing free stroke obviously with the arpeggios, but my preparation is such that I do P, then I, M, and A prepare, and then I follow through with those. Yeah, and I do those in a set like. Sort of like that, and then I go back and I do fingers 2 and 3, trills all the way across. And this set now becomes a little bit more challenging to bring out without the fourth finger tensing up or moving around. So I'll find that place, and I'll just say this: as I'm playing, I'm trying to quiet the fourth finger. So we need to kind of change our mode of focus here sometimes, in that meaning I'm trying to work on my technique while I'm warming up too. So if today my fourth finger is not behaving as I want it to, like say it's not staying there over the second string, or it's just kind of like wildly tensing up like that, then I stop doing the trill and I just do taps. I do a modification. Little modifications to your technique practice are really good. So then I can think about my form. I can think about the control and independence of that finger, but I can still do some taps, and I'm kind of building up to that version when I'm going to do the actual trills. And so now I'm making that motion, basically just doing, like ghost trills or baby trills, whatever you want to think about it. I just kind of think about that form of my hand too, the direction that I have things. And then when I'm ready to put the trill back in, I really think about the distribution of weight across the hand. So then that's when it comes into play. I can demonstrate best with like a 1/4 slur. So if I'm doing a slur from the first to fourth finger, I'm taking the weight from one side, the first, into the first finger, and I'm pouring that weight into the fourth finger, like that. And when I do that well, I start off with a nice distribution of weight, or placement of weight into the first string through the fourth finger. And then that gives me a better chance to make a good slur. And now I'll get more sound just with no right hand. And I can do a decrescendo, and then a crescendo. Same thing can be true with the second and third finger, but now, of course, since those two fingers are closer together, moving my weight from the second finger into the third finger is going to be a much different feel of the experience. In other words, I'm just lightly moving that weight back and forth instead of moving it drastically from one side of the hand all the way to the opposite side of the hand. But I am still experiencing that weight exchange. Okay, the quickness and speed of that weight exchange is important too. Accuracy of placement can be a thing too. So now I think about that, and the plucking that's going on in the left hand too being a part of that stroke. And then on the second string, same thing. Now, if you want to get a set of variations into this, you want to just start going further, you can also try these with, say, fixed fingers. So you can do 2, 3 slurs. And now I have my fourth finger there on the fifth string. So I have slurs that can go on here with 1, 4. And then slurs that can go on here with 2 and 3. And then you're trying to do 2 slurs at the same time. And try to get those 2 to speak. That's a fun variation on that. All of these things, I'm just showing you kind of the base level of what can be done, and then you build upon that. So now, one last thought after I do all of those arpeggios with the right hand and the slurs over here. I do some stretching exercise, and one that I really like to do is one that I can combine stretching with arpeggios. And I do an arpeggio pattern in the right hand. Just to keep it simple, we'll do a P-I-M-A-M-I, just really simple, basic one. But there is a tremolo one I like to do too, which is P-I-M-A-M-I, P-A-M-I-M-A, whoops, P-A-M-I-M-A, all on the third string. So something like that. But I'm just going to do the P-I-M-A-M-I for now. So I just go here, right? I have my fingers stacked there. The left hand is just in a major 7th chord. My 4th finger is there on the 12th fret. And then each finger to a string going down that way. And then I just move the first finger back 1. And the second finger back 1. The third finger back 1. The fourth finger back 1. Just like this. I do this now. I'm going a little faster just for demonstration purposes, but I do this really slowly. I may even put some vibrato on there. Stretching exercises are not about speed. It's about time just sitting there. Notice my thumb move and adjust as my first finger goes down. The vibrato there, that really is nice. It gives a little gentle massage to the fingers as well. This is kind of a concept of being, it should be less, this particular exercise should be less aerobic-like and more yoga-like, like yin yoga, where you're just letting the stretch just settle into your hand, letting it happen over time. Kind of thinking about things like we can create shapes and changes in our environment through geology, like the Grand Canyon, or it could be created like the Gulf of Mexico, a massive crater strike and one big thing is changed, or gradually and eventually over time we make that change. This is the approach with stretching: gradual changes incrementally over time. And really with most of technique, honestly, I can't think of any technical thing you're going to do that then like at the end of the day you're playing your scales 5 times faster or something. But that's a basic warm up that I do. Now, bringing the hands together, I'll just say this one thing that I really like is just as I bring the hands together, I work some kind of chromatic exercise, perhaps on a single string, and then I'll introduce string crossing. So I might do something like a chromatic pattern with 1, 2, 3, and 4, like. And I'm looking that my hand remains relaxed as I alternate there. In that tempo, I would start again. I would put my metronome on and probably work a tempo range to see. Now, before we hit right up against the hour, I want to pause there and see if there are any questions that anyone has thus far. Maybe there are some things in the Q&A or anything that I've done today. No? Okay. Well, that's fine. Let's do one last thing, just to show you guys something that I would work. And now this is an exercise that I do. I'm going to show you 2 parts of it really, that I think is really important for us to work on. Having some kind of routine, first of all, is most important. So whatever you're doing, having a routine where you sit down and do that every day is super important. The second thing that I would suggest with your technical development is avoid the temptation to hit your technique like it's all one long session and doing only technique for that whole long thing. I recommend taking blocks of technique and breaking it up across the day. So you might start with this warm up and then go on and do a little arpeggio set. And then the next thing you do in that hour, that block of time would be some repertoire. Maybe it's arpeggio based or something like that. And then you come back later in your next practice session, you need to gently warm up the hands a bit, maybe focus on some scales or something like that. And then the next part of that session would be about your repertoire. This can really help us avoid the issue of getting mired in all technical studies and not developing our rep enough. It's definitely something I was guilty of early on in my student days. I just got absolutely technique exercise obsessed and neglected much of my repertoire, and then had to scramble to get the pieces together in my rep, and never really feeling like I had that consistency of form. So I would recommend that in there, just in how you set up your technique. Now, the first thing that I would do with a introduction of the two hands together, truly playing something, is that chromatic passage I just showed you. So those are fingers on the same string. Now, I really like the concept of working with the right hand motion and follow through. I didn't mention this when I was doing the fingers alone at the beginning, and I should have. One thing I do if I'm noticing any issue with form and follow through is I'll retrain the hand or remind the hand how that works by plucking I, M, and A all together. Something like this. And trying to get that sound just the way I want. Maybe experimenting with different tone colors to see how the string responds. And then I'm going to focus on just two fingers at a time. And I'm just going to play I and M together. Then I go along playing thirds, and I'm going to do thirds up to the 12th fret, just doing this. I'm in G major. More or less playing I and M together, thirds all the way up and back down. What I'm listening really carefully for there is the vertical alignment of those two notes, that I don't have something like this. You just hear it's kind of rough around the edges where my I finger was going through too early, and I want the two to work and operate as one unit. Something like this. Making sure that my arm motion here is shifting at the shoulder. So then from there, I can add in some arpeggio patterns. I really like. I honestly think that Scott Tennant's suggestion in Pumping Iron about the Giuliani number 1 being a really important one to not overlook it. Super important. Just do that simple exercise and go on to the next. I can't tell you how many times I will ask someone to play that exercise or do that. And there are like 5 things wrong with the right hand, and they're wanting to go on and play Villalobos Etude number 1. And one of the things that I'll just say is one of the last thoughts for today. Really watch what Lynn mentioned. This, it was amazing in a masterclass yesterday. She talked about the thumb being the bully of the hand. I use that exact same phrase. It's so true. So when I'm playing that, sometimes I'll do Carcassi 1 strings alone, but I start out of order. I start with the notes where it's strings 1, 2, and 3 all together, and I just play that. And then I go to strings 1, 2, and 4, and then strings 1, 2, and 5. What I'm looking for there, basically, if I just do that in isolation of the thumb only, I'm looking for the thumb to more or less open as the hand stays in position relative to the strings. Oftentimes we get this starting, and the thumb drags the hand out of position. That's really bad. That we don't want that. We want the thumb to simply open up like this. Again, like using the scissors that I was talking about yesterday. Okay. So that's all. Unfortunately, we could talk about this kind of thing or show these kinds of things for hours at a time, and be happy to do more. But we need to get on to our noon masterclass. So if any of you have any lingering questions that you have, we can ask in between things, or you can chime in and ask in the Q&As. I'm following along with the day's activities throughout the day, so be happy to answer those off there. Or you can send me an email. So it's great to see you all, and I will see you soon in the masterclass.